Aloha. Usually I don't speak. Usually I don't speak from notes, but I've made it a point to write down a bunch of them, which I reserve the right to employ or not. But before I go into my not very extensively prepared comments, I would like to first express to the land here, to the Aina, that I very much appreciate being invited back. By the land, I mean the Hawaiian Islands in general. I've been very itinerant in my life, and I don't think I ever stayed more than, and I've spent most of my time in Hawaii on the Big Island. I don't think I've ever spent more than 6 weeks at a time there, but I totted it up earlier, and I've probably spent a total of about 1.5 years of my life on the Big Island. And I've been very blessed in so many ways, and I like very much to appreciate the land, in particular because Hawaii is such a unique location. I have been fortunate, I guess probably 25 years ago, to have kayaked the Nepali on Kauai and camped for 4 nights at Kalalau and 3 nights at Miluli, and that was extremely great. And have been to Maui only 3 or 4 times, but up Haleakala twice, and once with Vimalananda's foster daughter to see the sunrise. And we happened to see the space shuttle's 2 booster rockets come back through the atmosphere, so there was all of a sudden this spectacular Roman candle green light show that, of course, we didn't know at the time. I thought possibly it was just, you know, Maui putting on a show. Can't ever tell. Maui is a trickster, you know. Him and his fish hook and everything. And I did go to Molokai once, and have been many times to Oahu. But I'm particularly fond of Hawaii. And I wrote several books there because I had friends who were working as massage therapists, one at the Mauna Lani, one at the Mauna Kea. They had to drive up the coast. Sometimes they were staying in Keaho, and then later they moved to outside of Hulualoa. And so all day long I could work, and then at night we'd have dinner and watch the Sumo Digest on late night TV. And the thing I was privileged to have been doing Homa, fire worship, during the eclipse, which passed pretty much bang exactly over Keaho. And I was fortunate, very fortunate, to have visited the Kapo Kohelele, which I think has possibly been locked up ever since. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Kapo Kohelele, the cave of the flying vagina. It's another story in itself, but it's quite a place. It's in Puna. It's not far from the. It's not terribly well. It's not exactly near Halema'uma'u, but the thing I liked most about the Big Island was being able to. I think I came first to Hawaii just for a night in Honolulu with Vimalananda in 1981, January, on our round the world trip, standby on Pan Am. And I felt a strong alignment with it, and I had no idea that I'd be spending so much time here. And of course, it was in, I think, '84 that Kilauea started her eruption that ended last year. And so all during that period, at least a dozen times I went out to the volcano, and always went to Hale and made my offering of ohelo berries first. Offer one, eat one, offer one, eat one, offer one. And then would go down and find red lava and make offerings into the red lava, because I'm a fire worshiper. And it's something completely unique to be able to take a coconut or a papaya or whatever and put it into red lava, and then to have your offering be, first of all, consumed by fire directly from the earth, and second, then to have it become part of the aina itself. So I felt like I needed to, for two reasons, that I needed to acknowledge Hawai'i. One, because yesterday I just presented a tea leaf, and I've offered many tea leaves and things inside the tea leaves to Hale Ma'u and to other vents in the volcano. And yesterday also a friend of mine who I knew from California but who's moved over here, and who I had always been kind of worried about, wondering whether he would go in the right direction or not. It turns out he is now managing 1,000 acres of coconut palms, and he started explaining all kinds of things that I like coconuts a lot. I spent a lot of my life in the tropics, and suddenly I'm learning coconuts put up a new rack of coconuts every month, and you have to know exactly when the coconuts are ready, and his daughter, who is 10, is now the person who's telling him, you know, those 2 racks are ready over there, leave that rack for another month. So, and then he was explaining to me how he's been able to start communicating with the coconut palms, which, there are many trees I communicate with. I have to say that I don't yet really speak coconut. It probably has something to do with the fact that he's around so many trees and so many different varieties that he's been able to align a little better with it. So I felt like that was, I do medicine and Jyotish, which is divination or astrology, and one of the main things about Jyotish is omens. So whenever possible, it's good when the environment communicates to you what you should or should not be doing. And I believe you shouldn't try to over-interpret things. So normally I just go from the perspective of, is it good or is it not so good? So I took the being offered a tea leaf yesterday and having my friend bring over some really extremely high quality coconut water and coconut cream. Primo coconut cream. So I thought, this is the perfect time to offer my respects and to recite the Hawaiian motto, which I also really appreciate. You know, it's like, I'm a native of Texas, and I don't know what our motto is, but probably something like, you know, we're the best. Wouldn't surprise me. But the motto of Hawaii is, Ua ma'u ke ea o ka'aina I kapono. The life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. Now, that's a big motto. Not only is that, you know, you're saying that the life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness, that's basically saying that if you want to be a Hawaiian, then you need to be righteous. And what does righteous mean? I mean, that's, at the very least, you have to have a righteous alignment with your ohana and with your aina, with your family and with the land. And so I would like to express my mahalo nui loa to the Hawaiian Islands, and especially to Hawai'i and to Madame Pele, not only because I have been permitted to do so many things, but because whenever I have started thinking too highly of what I have been able to do here, something has always reminded me how important it is to not dislocate your shoulder while you're patting yourself on the back. So, you probably can't see them, but I have a nice set of scars here, because the last time I went out to the lava, I was in a hurry, and it was dusk, and I thought it was light enough, and I had just been there not that long before, and I knew where the flow had cut Chain of Craters Road, and so I thought, I don't really need the flashlight. I'm going to rely on, you know, there's a little bit of light still there, and there's that red glow over there, and in fact, the lava had cut the road a little further in the direction of the parking lot, and so I pitched forward. There's only a couple of small scars over here, but there's some larger scars here. And that was right when we were starting out, so I still felt the obligation to go out and find the red lava, which I did. That took like 5 hours to go and come back. And then I went to Hilo Medical Center, and then they picked everything out, except apparently one tiny little piece of, thank God, let me just say also thank you, Madam Pele, for having me fall on Pahoehoe and not on A'a. So there's a tiny little piece of Pahoehoe that I had, it's been at least 15 years, and suddenly it started coming out. It's not out yet, but it started coming out just a couple of months ago. So that to me also suggested that it was a very interesting thing that it's coming out just at the time that I'm returning to Hawaii after a period of 6 years. So after the retreat is over, I intend to go spend a night and see what's left of Hale Ma'uma'u and salute the volcano, who's now asleep again, and thank her for everything, especially this. I was not thanking her at the time, because I'm an irritable person. But after mature reflection, and also once this was bandaged up, I was feeling a little more ready to acknowledge the fact that it was a great blessing. And that, I think, is where I would like to begin. Raghu requested me to speak a little on the law of karma. And Vimalananda was very much of the opinion that an action becomes a karma when you identify yourself with it. And of course, if a person is actually nobody, then one could actually wander around performing karmas, or performing actions, and not having them serve as karmas, serve it as things for whom, as a result of which the reaction would come in your direction. Because every action in the universe is always going to produce a reaction. That's Newton's third law of classical physics. Anything that happens is going to produce a reaction. If I'm identifying myself with the action, then I have, by virtue of that identification, I will be identifying myself with the reaction. So it is very much a desirable thing to do to be able to limit your identification with the actions that you perform. And there are many people, at least in India, have experimented with this concept over many millennia. One example of someone who apparently succeeded at it relatively well was Sita's father, King Janaka. He was the king of Videha. And in Sanskrit, there is actually a country, there is it used to be a country, now it's a district in India called Videha. But Videha actually means without a body. So even though Janaka had a body, it was as if he did not have a body. When he sat on his throne, he would keep one foot in the fire, not near the fire to keep it warm, but in the fire, because he and the fire were extremely well aligned. And that in itself is something, in my opinion, as having burned myself on many occasions, working with the fire, that to be able to put your foot in the fire is a great achievement. And he kept one of his wives on his thigh, aligning his energy with her, so that her Shakti could act through him to do what he needed to do in the world, but without identifying with that action either. So he could do that because he had lost all sense of his body, which is why, of course, Sita was not born in a normal way. You may know that Sita, and the word Sita means a furrow in the ground. And so when Janaka was plowing the ground, because at one day he thought, I should probably, it's my responsibility as the king to have a child. So how shall I do this? Well, I will arrange a yaga, a Vedic sacrifice, and we will accumulate some good juju and some good energy and create a child. But, as it transpires, while the ground was being plowed, in one of the furrows was found a small baby, and that was Sita. And that, of course, is why at the end of the Ramayana, she ended up being accepted back into the earth, because she had come from the earth in the first place. The earth meaning not just the external earth where Janaka was, but the internal earth of the Muladhara as well. So when you read the Ramayana, you always have to read it not only externally as happened, whenever it was it happened. Nobody knows when it happened. Vimalananda was of the opinion it happened 100,000 years ago or 1,000,000 years ago to a different species of humans. But whatever happened externally, you can also read the Ramayana as happening internally. The reflection of the macrocosm inside the microcosm. And that usually makes it not only easy to align yourself with that reality, but also to have that reality become, to whatever degree, alive inside you. Because one of the beautiful things of the human being is you can bring things to life inside you. Sadly, what a lot of people bring to life are not so good things. They bring to life, because in the context of life, yes, I mean, human life is very much like the wave. Where's the ocean? The waves over there in the ocean. It's very much, actually, for many people, like a cyclonic storm. I grew up on the Gulf Coast. We're very familiar with hurricanes there. They all have names. They all have personalities. But they also, even while they exist, they very much exist. But they only exist very temporarily. It's very similar in a way to how the human soul exists. It exists, but it's a temporary thing. It's not a permanent thing. There is the permanent reality of the Supreme Consciousness that has no limitation. But everything else is secondary. Everything else is created. Everything else is temporary. Sarvam kshanakam, as Lord Buddha said. Kshanakam sarvam. Everything is also unsatisfactory. Sarvam dukkham. Dukkham sarvam. Sometimes people translate dukkha as misery. But really, dukkha literally means bad space. So when you're in a bad space, that's dukkha. When things are aligned and harmonious, that's sukha, that's good space. So sometimes people translate sukha as pleasure, as enjoyment, but it has nothing to do with pleasure and enjoyment. It means being well aligned with your reality. If it's the reality of your physical organism, that means to be well aligned with all your microbiome and all the cells, human cells in your body, and with the prana and with the 5 elements that make you up. Everybody is aligned, everybody is cooperating. There's harmony, there's righteousness. So in that context, the health of the land is based in the righteousness of everybody who's part of it. Your body is a kshetra, it's a piece of territory in which all of these little human cells and all of the bacterial cells live. It's a country. And everybody in there thinks of themselves as residents of the country. And as long as things are going well, they do their jobs properly. They know what their jobs are. Everybody has a job. Everybody has an agenda, and everyone has a job. We encourage everyone to do their job. And in the context of that, to advance their agenda. When the agenda takes prominence over the job, then problems occur. That's what happens when you have a malignancy. You have a cell that decides that it wants to be immortal. Everybody wants to be immortal. Many people claim not to want to be immortal, but that's just the mind talking. The reptile brain always wants to be immortal because that's its job. Its job is to keep you alive no matter what. And that's why sometimes for some people it's so difficult to die, because the reptile brain is refusing. Sometimes it's good not to die. A few years ago, I forget his name, let's call him Frank. Frank was at that time the oldest World War I veteran in the US. And he got through the trenches in World War I, he thought he was safe, and then he had a career, and then he retired to the Philippines just in time to be taken by the Japanese and put in a prison camp for 4 years. So he went through 2 situations where he easily could have died. And so the interviewer said, "Frank, you could have died frequently." Frank said, "Yeah." And the interviewer said, "Frank, how is it you didn't die?" And Frank said, "It's very simple. When you feel like you're gonna die, don't." And that's what the reptile brain does. So when you talk to the reptile brain as a reptile brain, and you try to say to the reptile brain, "Oh, I'm feeling very spiritual. I would like to become nobody." I mean, reptiles don't really laugh. I mean, I've never seen a snake laugh, but if a snake could laugh, it would be guffawing all the way back into its little hole. Because that's meaningless to it. Which is why people have put a lot of energy into awakening the reptile energy and turning it into Kundalini so it can identify with something other than the job that it was engineered to do. It was engineered to do that job because without that, there were plenty of opportunities as evolution has occurred for things to not survive. So the most important thing has been survive. Now we've got to the point where we don't have to focus on survive anymore. So now we can negotiate with the reptile brain and start to move in a more positive direction. That often, however, does require us to integrate all of the different parts of our organism first. So kind of in a way, in order to become nobody, you first have to be somebody. You have to be a real human being. You have to be a human being that is not just focusing on humanness, which is what most human beings focus on nowadays, because the majority of humans on the planet now are living in urban environments. And in an urban environment, who are you around? You're around other humans. And you're around a few species that have learned how to manipulate humans. Dogs, cats, rats, cockroaches. The ones that have understood the human perspective and found ways to take advantage of the human blind spot. But humans, most humans, sadly, are not able to be on retreat and to have the advantage of being able to connect to the 5 elements. That's one of the things I really loved about going to Kilauea when she was erupting, because you go down a chain of craters road, and then especially right at nightfall, you would see the lava often flowing through the lava tubes into the ocean. So there was this red fire, there was fire, and then there was the ocean, that was water, and then there was the land, that was earth, and then there was the air, because there's always some breeze going on near the water. And it was all happening in space. So all the 5 elements were there, and they were vital. The Big Island is a very raw piece of land. It's owned by Madame Pele, and she is a strict proprietor when it comes to managing her property. And of course, she and Kamapua'a have their own drama going on. And it's good to appreciate who is doing what to whom and how. But for me, it was always, because it was not just, yes, I'm seeing this, it was like one can sense, because we're made up of the 5 elements. Those same 5 elements that are external are inside us. In fact, in Sanskrit, which is a samskaric language, samskara means something that has been effectively created. So on the one hand, samskaras in yoga mean you've done something so often that it has become second nature, and that creates vasanas, that creates tendencies that often you're not in control of. Those samskaras have to be got rid of. But samskara is also a positive thing. After a child is born, you give it a name, you cut its hair for the first time, you feed it. All of those are samskaras, because you have the desire to put the child on the right road so that it will continue to develop in a positive direction. So samskaras are not bad or good, they're samskaras. They're basically anything that becomes second nature to you is a kind of samskara. So learning how to drive is a samskara. Because, I don't know, if you're like me, I drive a lot in various countries. And at this stage, I don't need to remember, yes, now I shall turn on the car, now I shall put it in gear, now I shall put my foot on the clutch. I was just driving a manual transmission in Australia a couple of days ago. Now I shall put my foot on the brake. I don't have to think about that anymore because I've done it so often. It's all in muscle memory. If I had to think about it all the time, it would be horrendous. It would be exhausting. So we create habits for ourselves that can be utilitarian, unfortunately, because there are always reactions to any kind of action, and because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We may have the intention to create a good habit, but always when you do something, there is going to be some reaction that is not going to be as desirable as the action that you perform. So just because you are able to drive doesn't mean that you're a good driver, though it has been shown repeatedly that everybody thinks of themselves as being a good driver. And everybody gets into certain habits. And usually those habits are not useful when it comes to actually driving the car. Or those habits are not necessarily useful when it comes to driving yourself through life, because that's what life is all about. We're moving, we're always in a forward direction because we have directionality. The back for us is always the past. In front of us is always the future, from the perspective of the way our sense organs work. So we always are moving towards the future. This is a concept that is connected, that is built into the way that humans work. And where we are headed, the goal that we have is extremely critical when determining whether we're going to get there or not. So the goal of trying to achieve a state of alignment with reality so that there is a minimum amount of the individual person there and a maximum openness to everything that needs to flow through the person. Because really, the whole point of being a human being is to create a connection between the earth and the sky, between the individual and the non-individual, between that which is the microcosm and that which is the macrocosm. That's why humans were engineered. And we, of course, are at a critical stage for the human species. The earth is not going to fall to pieces. The earth has survived worse things than humans. Humans are sort of like a bad case of fleas or crab lice, or, you know, they're annoying. They create eczema, you know, it's like scratching is occurring. The earth is probably thinking, where can I get some ointment for these? That's such a terrible case of humans now. And it was bad enough when humans were still fairly well aligned with nature, because humans have always been ambitious, or as long as we know them, they've been. As long as we've been around, we've been ambitious. Otherwise, they would not have colonized the entire world. Otherwise, the megafauna would not have disappeared from every continent within a couple of thousand years after the humans got there. So, and that was bad enough before humans started turning into ghosts. I was just in Australia, and I've been fortunate to have spent a good time, a bit of time there, and the Aboriginals are the culture in the world that has had a more or less continuous connection, cultural connection with the land since 60,000 years or so, than anywhere on Earth. And when the first Europeans started to arrive in Australia, they were regarded as being ghosts. And not because they had white skin, but because when an Aboriginal person looks at the landscape, they see the life that's in the landscape. They see the reality of what's going on in the landscape. And they looked at the people who came there, who, frankly, were convicts, and they saw that there was nothing there. There was no, I mean, they were functioning, they were bodies, but there was no connection to the life force. There was no connection to the environment. There was no connection to the Ainu. And of course, they hoped that this was just a temporary, you know, bunch of ghosts showed up from somewhere. I'm sure they summoned all the shamans and said, let's get rid of them. And they did a bunch of, I'm sure, all kinds of exorcisms, but it did no good because there were too many ghosts and they were too determined. Now we're at the stage, of course, where so many people in the world are ghosts. So many, many, many people in the world are ghosts. They have no connection to anything. And they react to that in different ways. There's an epidemic of I forget the Japanese word, but in Japan, of young people just going and living in the basement and never coming out, never meeting anyone. The abnormality in human life has reached a dramatic stage. So, at the stage that we're in, I think that one important part of being able to move in the direction of being nobody, to be able to move in the direction of opening yourself to do what humans are supposed to do, is to become connected to the land. You have to become somebody before you can become nobody. And somebody doesn't mean you have to become famous. Somebody doesn't have to mean you become rich or anything else. It means you have to be a genuine human being. I had a dear friend who was originally from Switzerland, moved to India in his early 20s, and then lived there for more than 60 years as a sadhu, as a renunciate, until his death a couple of years ago. Swami Gyanananda was his name. And one of the things that he liked to say is that everyone is born original, but most people die copies. Everyone is born original, but most people are acculturated. Originally it was by our parents and grandparents and so on. Now children are being acculturated by screens, by the internet, by the fake astral world. So young people are being made copies from age 1, age 2. I mean, I've seen 1-year-olds pick up iPads and start and locate things on it. We're in uncharted waters, and all of us, I believe, as a result of that, need to make a diligent effort, and you're here on retreat, this is the perfect time to do it, to connect to the elements, to connect to the land and the plants and the animals, and communicate with them in whatever way we can. Allow them, and communicating with them doesn't, you don't walk over there and say, "Hello, tea tree, how are you doing? Good to see ya." I mean, you can do that, but that doesn't mean anything to the tea tree, because it doesn't speak human, it speaks tea. So it may take a little time, but I've always found tea bushes easy to communicate with. They're very friendly, and they like humans to use them. They produce lots and lots of leaves, and they like for humans to offer them. That's one thing that's really important to remember, that plants like to, if they're properly respected, they like to cooperate with humans, because humans have the ability to extend awareness more effectively and in greater direction than most animals and plants do. So this is what we should be doing. We should be extending our awareness in a positive way, and not trying to project humanity on them, but rather to open ourselves and request politely to offer respect to everything in the environment, to be righteous about it, and to request that the plants and the animals and everything else in the neighborhood should cooperate with us. And when you do that, then you have the satisfying experience of, during that period, of not being a human, which means you're being temporarily something in the direction of being not so much of a body, less of a body, less of an individual, and more of someone who is offering respect to the environment and requesting the environment to communicate with us. And of course, it is always the case that as long as you have a physical body, your humanness is going to always have the potential to redisplay itself, because that's what the physical body is. It's a human body, and everything that we associate with being human is something that has been very deeply embedded in our ability to function as conscious organisms. So the more that we can open ourselves to the rest of the environment, the more that we can lay down the burden of being human, which is a big old burden, especially considering what we as humans have been doing to the rest of the planet. So one of the very important things about you or me or anyone as an individual trying to become nobody or no one is the fact that as long as you have a human body, we are connected, thankfully, not in an extreme way, but at least in an archetypal way to every other human everywhere. So there's a tremendous amount of inertia of all of the other humans who are focusing on being human, trying to encourage everyone who is human to be very, very human. So the degree of anthropocentrism, centering around humanness, is increasing day by day. And just to be able to, you know, it's like the Red Queen, you have to gallop along in order to stay in one place. Just to keep from being influenced by all these other humans, the vast majority of whom, the extraordinarily vast majority of whom we will never meet, but are still humans and are still interacting with one another. And I mean, it was bad enough when there was no internet. But now there's a third of the planet is connected on Facebook. 2 point some odd billion people are connected on one platform. So, and there's billions of other things, and people are enthusiastically everywhere moving in the direction of doing more of that and focusing more on how humans interact with one another. And I spend a lot of time, I calculated that too, I've spent a total of 20 years of my life in India, and now I spend about 6 months of the year there, and India has the cheapest cell data in the world. I mean, cheap to the extent of, I just spent $25 for 2 gigabytes a day for 1 year. So that means everybody is on their phone all the time because it's extremely cheap. And they're sending WhatsApp messages left and right all day long. So India, this place where there are great saints have appeared. And I would like to acknowledge Babaji in particular. Vimalananda, I never met him in the flesh, but he was one of the extremely small number of spiritual people that Vimalananda had a good opinion about. And he had a very good opinion about it. And he only had a good opinion, not about people who were showing themselves off. He had a good opinion about somebody who was really doing his job properly, meaning getting out of the way and allowing the deity to exist there all the time. Which is what, according to Vimalananda, becoming nobody really was. I mean, yes, you could connect with the supreme reality and disappear, but he didn't have any value for that. He said, Bhakti is not about disappearing. Bhakti is about remaining so that you can enjoy the juice of the devotion that you extend towards your deity and that the deity reflects back in your direction. In fact, he said that the entire universe has been generated because the supreme reality wanted to experience itself. Vimalananda, one of the first things I did after I met him was accompany him to I met him in Pune. He always used to come to Pune during the monsoon because that was when the horses race. He owned racehorses. I spent a lot of time at the race course. You can learn a lot at the race course. Most of it, most of it has very little to do with being spiritual other than to know what not to do if you want to move in a spiritual direction. But not long after I met him, he was going outside of Pune, and so we're talking about, this is 45 years ago, 1975, September. Okay, 44 years. And he was going out of Pune to do Homa, to do fire worship, outside of a small village, which is no longer small, or it's much bigger now. It's called Alandi. And Alandi is the place where Jnaneshwar Maharaj has his samadhi. How many of you have heard of Jnaneshwar Maharaj? Jnaneshwar Maharaj was one of the greatest saints ever in India. He lived about 700 years ago. And well, it's my favorite commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. Technically, it's called the Bhavartha Deepika, but everybody knows it as the Jnaneshwari. It is available in English. And it's not only a commentary on the Gita, because he was a devotee as well as a tantric. It also explains how to raise your kundalini. It does all kinds of, it's all in there if you know how to read it properly. And of course, that's the challenge, to actually know how to read it properly. But Jnaneshwar Maharaj took, after he wrote this, when he was 21 or 22 or something, he took Jivan Samadhi. He went and sat in a cave, and they closed up the cave, and he's been there ever since. And unfortunately now Arlandi is full of people, but back at that time you could actually do puja to his samadhi. And when Vimalananda would point out to me, you pour milk on the samadhi, and there are things written in the stone in an alphabet that nobody knows anymore, but that describe a method of sadhana that was put there for the purpose of people who could come and understand it, which sadly is nobody nowadays. But at least the samadhi is still there, and he's still there. And in addition to his commentary on the Gita, he wrote a couple of other works, the Changdev Pashashti, which was it was 65 verses written to Yogi Changdev. And Changdev means Mr. Good-looking Yogi. Yogi Handsome. And Yogi Handsome was a clever character who knew his good Hatha Yoga. And when he was a relatively young man, he discovered that he was only going to meet his guru after 1,400 years. And he thought to himself, if I die and be reborn repeatedly, I might end up 1,400 years from now being born in a family who has no interest in spiritual things, and I may miss the opportunity. Therefore, I'd better stay alive. So, he wants to become nobody, because that's what the guru can do for you. But in order to do that, he has to become somebody. So he does his yoga. Every 100 years, an astrological combination comes for him to die, and he goes into samadhi, which means he's not in his body, which means death can't locate him. The moment goes away, he comes back, lives for another 100 years, and this goes on for 1,400 years. And then he hears about Jnaneshwar and his siblings, because Jnaneshwar's guru was his brother, Nivrittinath, who was initiated by Gaininath, who was created by Gorakhnath. And their younger brother was named Sopan, and their sister was named Muktabai, Mukta meaning freedom. So there's a long story, and Changdev receives this letter from Jnaneshwar in the 65 verses and thinks, I need to meet this may be the moment, maybe things are happening for me. So he gets on this tiger and grabs hold of his cobra, which he uses as a lasso, and all of his disciples are behind him shouting, Jai Shankar, Bam Bam Bole, and things like that. Because they have to, Guruji is an important guy, he's 1,400 years old. This is not trivial. So Guruji is thinking about something else. The disciples are all thinking about, our Guruji is so important. So, you know, they have created their own, they have become somebody by reflecting off of somebody who's trying very hard not to be somebody. But that's what you expect disciples to do this. Disciples, according to Vimalananda, are supposed to be dim-witted. Because then that gives something for the guru to do. You know, yes, it's great to have a wonderful disciple, but also how often do you find them? So you expect the disciple to be an idiot. So here comes Changdev with all these idiot disciples behind him. You know, what a great guru we got. And Gyaneshwar and his siblings are sitting there quietly, and they notice from afar, you know, by clairvoyance that he's arriving, and they think, oh my goodness, we're living here, we have no, you know, we don't have anything, we can't offer him any fancy atithi satkar, that means, you know, honoring of the guests, because we don't have anything. So at the very least, they said, what we can do is we can go and meet him. So they decided that they should go meet him well before he reached them. So they got on a wall and flew on the wall in the air to where he was. And of course, this impressed Changdev. This impressed the disciples, who now, of course, were a little confused because, you know, Guruji on the one hand is 1,400 years old. On the other hand, there's these 4 teenagers flying on a wall. Cognitive dissonance. So they land there and everybody meets everybody, Hana, Hana, Hana. And then it transpires that Changdev's guru, 1,400 years old, is Muktabai, 14 years old. Initiation happens, everybody's happy. And now he can become nobody after having been somebody for those 1,400 years. The other text that Jnaneshwar wrote is called the Amritanubhava. Amrita means nectar, and Anubhava means experience. So the Amritanubhava means simultaneously the experience of nectar and the nectar of experience. And he writes a number of things. You can, I am pretty sure, find it online. And especially the first chapter, it's a description of how Shiva and Shakti are the same, but not the same. It's really sublime poetry. And at one point in the Amritanubhava, Jnaneshwar says, in the same way that a human being, in order to see his or her face, has to have a mirror, the supreme reality was not satisfied simply being supreme. I mean, it's great to be supreme, but you have no qualities, you have no time, no space, no causation, you have no position, you have nothing. Except, okay, Sat Chidananda, that's not nothing. But you can't experience it, because there's nobody to experience. There's only you. You're experiencing it, but you can't even say you're experiencing it, because that would imply there was something for you to experience. But there ain't, because there's only you. So it is said, Jnaneshwar said, and other people have said, other clever people who I salute and bow down to, that's why the universe exists. The universe is a mirror for the supreme reality. The macrocosm and the microcosm, that's you and me, we're also mirrors for that supreme reality. And the nice thing about being a microcosm is we don't have to wait till the end of the kalpa for everything to get harmonized and resolved. Each one of us can accelerate that evolution and move in the direction of actually reconnecting to that supreme reality. But we can't do that unless we first establish ourselves so that we can have the opportunity to open ourselves and perceive what that supreme reality is. So that's what Jnaneshwar taught. And Vimalananda was very fond of not only singing the bhajan that is even today sung by most of the devotees of Vittala. Jnaneshwar and his siblings and all of the great saints of Maharashtra like Tukaram and Namdev and so on, they were all devotees of Vittala. Vittala is a form of Vishnu who lives in the city of Pandharpur in southwest Maharashtra. Probably you've never heard of Vittala. Lots of people have. And there were a number of very great saints in Maharashtra back at this time, and they would all sing to Vittala. And Vimalananda liked to tell the story of how once Jnaneshwar and his siblings and some of these other saints, including Namdev, were on a big yatra. They were going to all the sacred sites in India. And one day they came to a place, it was hot. If you've ever been in India in May, you will know that it is hot. And it is nice to have water to drink, so they came to a well. But there was no rope. So there was the bucket, but there was no rope. What to do? So Jnaneshwar's brother, Nivrittinath, who was an expert tantric, flew down with the bucket into the well, filled the bucket, flew back up to outside of the well. Everybody had the water. They were happy. They were still thirsty because it was late in the afternoon. They hadn't had any water for a while. So Nivritti was about to go back down into the well again, and Namdev said, you know, you can't monopolize the experience. Let me try now. So Namdev started to sing, Vittala, 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 Vittala. And he continued singing. And pretty soon, well, all the Jnaneshwar and everybody, of course, was listening, and they were allowing themselves to be possessed by Vittala. And everybody was experiencing great bliss. And it didn't take that long before all of the trees in the neighborhood started to bend in the direction of Namdev. The grass was moving towards Namdev. All of the animals started coming towards Namdev. And after a little bit, the water started coming up through the well and came out of the well so that it could get closer to Namdev. And at that point, of course, there was more water. Everybody drank, they were nice, they felt good. And then Jnaneshwar said to himself, now I've seen everything. I've seen what you can do with Tantra. I've seen what you can do with Bhakti. I don't need to remain wandering around in the world anymore. I will sit in one place and make myself available for the people who need to connect with me. And so he went and he took Samadhi, and the cave was lost for 300 or 400 years until Eknath Maharaj, who was a great saint in Maharashtra and who supposedly was a partial incarnation of Jnaneshwar, had a dream one night. And in the dream, Jnaneshwar said, you know, everything is fine here in the cave except that this tree, it has its root wrapped around my neck. And if it continues, it's going to strangle me, which I'm not really in the mood to have happen. So if you don't mind, would you please come here, open the cave, remove the root, and then everything will be hunky-dory again. So Eknath Maharaj went there, removed the root, and there was the text of the Jnaneshwari on Jnaneshwar's lap. So he removed the text, which is why we have the text. So the text, you know, kind of like they do in Tibet, they the text will go for a few centuries until the right moment. And at the right moment, it emerged. And now, as a result of that, the nectar of that text is available to everyone. Because Jnaneshwar knew that that was the right time for him to stop doing and being somebody and to pull himself back in and wait for the right time to allow what he had created to appear in the world. I haven't applied. I really feel obligate. I need to look at my notes. I created them. I've actually covered most of it. Not so bad. I would also like to comment on how much. Good, I have plenty of time. Comment on how much I appreciated hearing mention of vipassana, of insight meditation, because I've only been on 3 10-day vipassana retreats, but the last one was just a couple of months ago. And all 3 times I've gone to Igatpuri, which is outside of Bombay, about 3 hours, and is the place where, that was the main place where Goenkaji came and positioned himself when he came from Burma. And the first time I did it was 6 years ago in 2013, and it happened to be 10 days after Goenkaji had left his body. So I was kind of curious as to what I would find, because of course I've been to many ashrams in India and I've seen all kinds of dramas, because usually ashram and drama go together. Kind of like soup and sandwich and horse and carriage and things like that, because very commonly a lot of the people who end up in the ashram are people who can't fit in anywhere else. They're not the people who have actually gone out and done things in the world. They're the people who are running away from the world. And of course they're running away from the world because they haven't learned how to cope. And you don't expect them to learn how to cope in an ashram where nobody else is learning how to cope. So when that happens, you're always really happy to see if things are moving along well. So I was kind of curious how this would be. And also, you know, it's often the case that there is a real cult of the guru becomes not a figure of worship in a genuine, healthy way, but becomes an idol. Then idolatry happens, and that's also not so attractive. But one thing I was very much appreciated is that there was no giant picture with garlands, and there were no people, you know, histrionically wailing and things like that. It was very much the fact that he had been there and now he was gone. And I mean, actually going through the Vipassana retreat was challenging and very rewarding, but just, I mean, that teaching of and not only of Goenkaji himself, but of the pattern that he set for people to appreciate the teaching, respect the teacher, but don't. He used to, I mean, he used to joke that if he allowed them, people would be singing Hare Goenka, Hare Goenka, just like they sing Hare Krishna, and then, but fortunately there was none of that there, because while he needed to be somebody, he was somebody. And then he was able to become nobody. So, one thing that I have discovered, I'm now 66 and a half, which is kind of frightening in itself. And I was thinking back to when I did the program with Ram Dass 13 years ago. So I was 13 years younger. He was 13 years younger. And so I was thinking to myself that at age 53, he would have been 13 years younger, he's 88 now, so he would have been 75. I understood a lot less about what it meant to be 75 than I understand today about what it means to be 88. Even though I'm not at 88 yet, I'm close enough to 88 that I have a much better idea about it. And this is one thing that has been mentioned to young people, and it was mentioned to me, and it has been, I expect since the beginning of the human species, that older people have told young people that no matter how much you imagine or how much you think about it, you cannot possibly, under any circumstances, know what it is like to be older. And I heard people say this to me when I was young, and I thought, pshaw. You're just saying this because you are old. You're near your expiry date. Whereas I'm young and I have all kinds, I know everything. You know? As Mark Twain said, when I was 15, I was astonished at how ignorant my father was. And when I became 21, I was amazed at how much the old man had learned in 6 years. So, as I have gotten less young, I still don't think of myself as being old. Because 60 is the new 42, 70 is the new 55. But as I have become less young, I've realized that you don't have any clue when you're young what it is like to be young. Because it is something that you have to learn through your tissues. And this is a very valuable thing to learn. And this is one reason, I think, that it was never the concept in India that people should go off and become saints when they were teenagers. Okay, Yaneshwar was an exception, so were his siblings. But the concept was always that from the time you were born until you stopped growing, you were in this stage of brahmacharya, which does not only mean celibacy. Brahmacharya means you should align yourself with reality. You should train your body as it is growing so that you are pointed in the direction of reality, so that you can learn everything you need to learn, so you can discover what your dharma is. If you really want to become nobody, you can only do that once you know what your personal dharma is. And your personal dharma means what you are supposed to be doing in the world. Everybody is supposed to be doing something. No one has been born in the world randomly. Everyone has a whole set of karmas that have put that individual here to perform some activity, to be active in the world. There is no evading karma as long as you are a human being. You can minimize it, but you can't evade it. You're eating, you're breathing, you're moving around, you're interacting with the environment. So you can minimize your karma, but you're still performing karma. So you would like very much for the environment to cooperate with you, which will happen if you cooperate with the environment. If you cooperate with the environment will help you to figure out what needs to be done, when, where, how, and occasionally why. Why, frequently, you will never find out. It is better not to ask why. Especially because you are unlikely to get a clear answer. So it is very good, however, to try to align yourself with your own personal dharma. And your own personal dharma is pretty much equated with how your organism is aligned with nature. That means how your prana is functioning. Your dharma, the path of your dharma, is the path that your prana, your life force, wants you to follow through the world. That's the way that all of the animals and all of the plants, they follow how the life force is opening itself to them. They move towards the life force because they know that they need the life force. And the sad thing about human beings is the majority of human beings either don't believe in the life force, or if they do, they have no clue about where to locate it, when in fact it's inside them all the time. As they say in Hindi, Lakshmi pade paas hain, batke khos hazar. As in some languages, Hindi, it's a good language for poetry. It sounds better in Hindi. So it's about Lakshmi, but it could be about prana, for example. It is lying next to you, and you're bhatkawing means you're wandering in a stupid fashion for 2,000 or 3,000 miles for something that is right next to you. So prana is everywhere. We're getting it immediately, moment by moment through our breathing. We're getting it at a delayed fashion through the food that we eat and digest and assimilate and utilize. And it is the prana that is enlivening us, and it's the prana that is going to facilitate our doing what we need to do in the world. And possibly you have heard of Swami Nityananda, Muktananda, Gurumai, Nityananda. Nityananda was a very great saint who also Vimalananda had a high opinion about. Apparently over here on Hawai'i, there is a shrine to Nityananda. I just learned about thanks to KD yesterday. And Nityananda wrote a book, I don't remember the name of it, but in his book, he makes a very clear and bold statement, and that is that if you want to study Vedanta, Vedanta is prana. Vedanta is prana. Vedanta is not a bunch of people talking about how they have lost the sense of I-ness and everything. Vedanta is prana. If the prana is acting through you, you don't have to worry about the sense of I-ness. It will take care of that. You don't have to worry about what direction you're going in. It will move you in the right direction. The more the prana is, the more you're acting in a way in which you are allowing the prana to move you along, as long as the prana is telling you what to do, it's leading you, it's the nayaka. The more that happens, the more you are in fact nobody. The more the prana is doing the work and you are showing up, the organism that is you is showing up in order to transact whatever kind of things need to be transacted. So he said the practice of Vedanta is to fill all of the nadis in your body with prana. So that's very simple. It's very simple to hear. It is not all simple to do. Because first of all, you have to make sure that your nadis are not obstructed. And it's very easy for your nadis to be obstructed because there is a mind and a body. And if your body is not functioning properly, your nadis, those are the ethereal nerves in your ethereal body. We have the annamaya kosha, the body that's made up of the food, and it's nourished by food, and it's screwed up by food, and it's brought back into alignment by food. And you have the pranamaya kosha, which is created out of prana, which is nourished by prana, which is screwed up by prana, which is brought back into alignment by prana. And you have the manomaya kosha, the mind, which is created out of emotions and thoughts and symbols and archetypal things, and bhutas, which means previous patterns that have taken on a certain life of their own, elementals, dead humans, ancestors, big problem with ancestors, etc. And those things are all crowding into the manomaya kosha. And all of those things create it, all of those things screw it up, and all of those things properly align, bring it back into alignment. Then you have the Vijnana Maya Kosha, or the causal body, which is where all the karmas are located, that are manifest, that are projecting themselves into the mental body and into the pranic body and into the physical body. And then the Ananda Maya Kosha, the greater causal body, which is all the karmas of the land and the species and the planet and the solar system and so on. So you have all of these things that have come together, aligned themselves for the creation of you. And in order for you to stay alive, you need the prana. In order for the prana to do the job of keeping you alive, it has to be able to circulate. That's why we pay so much attention in Ayurveda to the 5 elements, because we want there to be just the right amount of earth, which creates stability, and just the right amount of water, which is, after all, humans are mostly water, and just the right amount of fire in the right place, in the right context, doing the right thing to create transformations, and just the right amount of air to circulate everything, and just the right amount of space in which things can circulate. Everything has to be finely tuned. If things are finely tuned, then you will align properly, the prana will move through you. Everything that needs to work through you, whatever that might be. In the case of Vimalananda, that was all kinds of different gods and goddesses and saints, and you could never tell. He was very fond of allowing a chess player from the 19th century to come into his body, Paul Morphy, and play chess games with people just for fun. So that's one way in order to become no body, where you're not limited to one personality. You bring in personalities as you require them. Then you're finished with that personality, you send it back somewhere, and then you get another personality. That is one approach. It is not also an easy approach, but it is one approach. So there are many different approaches. But the approach of Nityananda was, make sure that there is prana in your organism. So when people talk about Vedanta, it's important to remember that the word Veda means knowledge. And the Vedas were not somebody reading from, notes or flashcards or WhatsApp. It was the direct perception of the supreme reality and the various astral realities. So people in the Vedic era would drink soma, go off into the astral world, do a bunch of stuff. And we, as humans today, find it very difficult to understand how things might have been happening back at that time. Let me give you an example before I continue, which I will. And that example is, probably you've all heard of the Ramayana. Probably you know a little bit about the Ramayana. Probably you know that poor old Rama, when he was just about to get crowned, anointed king, to have the Raj Abhisheka, he had to go off into the forest, and the wife insisted on coming, and the brother insisted on coming, and the other brothers insisted on coming, but they had to be dissuaded because somebody had to run the country. And the reason why this happened was because of King Dasharatha's third wife. Dasharatha had 3 wives. Wife number 1 was called Kaushalya. And Kaushalya comes from the word kusha. And kusha is a type of grass that is used in Indian rituals. All kinds of rituals, especially ancestor rituals. But it's razor sharp. You can cut yourself very easily. So kusha, a person who is Kaushalya, is a person who can deal with reality without slicing themselves up dramatically. If you look in the Bhagavad Gita, you will find that Krishna defines yoga in 3 or 4 places, and one of those definitions of yoga is yogaha karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is adeptness in action, but he uses that word kaushala. It means you are performing the karmas, but you're doing it in such a way that you're minimizing the reaction of the karma to yourself or to anybody else for that matter. So Kaushalya was the mother of Rama. So she was an adept woman, no wonder she was the mother of Rama. And Sumitra was the mother of Lakshmana. And Sumitra means good friend. So she was a good friend. So you're going to have wives. One should be adept and one should be a good friend. Number 3 was named Kaikeyi. And Kaikeyi means basically Ms. Extremely Curious. Always wondering what's going on. Always sticking the snout in, sometimes where it would not belong. But the reason why, of course, the reason why Kaikeyi asked Dasharatha to send Rama off into the forest and to make her son Bharat the king was because she was not stable like Kaushalya. She was not stable like Sumitra. Curiosity is not a stable thing. It goes here, it goes there, it goes somewhere else. So she was able to be disturbed by her unpleasant servant, Mantra. Now, why she had an unpleasant servant is a question that inquiring minds want to know. Surely they could have found somebody who was a better quality servant who would keep her on the right path, but I guess that's what the law of karma is always all about. So she was deluded by Mantra. But Dasharatha, which means 10 chariots, which means the 10 sense organs, Dasharatha was not, he would have had no reason to agree to this preposterous proposal had he not granted her 2 boons. And he granted her these 2 boons because once he had been involved in fighting a war with the Devas against the Asuras. And the Devas and the Asuras are ethereal races of beings. The Devas are were worshipped by the Vedic people as gods, and the Asuras were demonic forces according to the way things were set up there. In Iran, the Asuras were worshipped as gods and the Devas were bad. In fact, that's where we get our word devil, from the Persian word daiva. And the supreme god in Zoroastrianism was Ahura. And in Zoroastrianism, and in ancient Persian, H is used instead of S in Sanskrit. So Ahura is really Asura. The word Soma in ancient Persian is Hom. So these were 2 groups of ethereal beings who were cousins, but who had deluded the human beings into thinking that we were good and they were bad. And over in Iran, it was like the Asuras are good and the Devas are bad. Anyway, they were always fighting with one another. And somehow, the Devas enlisted Dasharatha to go fight, and Kaikeyi, for some reason or another, was his charioteer. And so he was at one point overcome, and she galloped the chariot away and saved him. And that's why she got the 2 boons. So, that's understandable. I mean, somebody saves you, you offer some boons, and possibly you think, man, you know, what is she going to ask for? A big palace, nice crown, extra servants? But no, she asked for this. But the question that has always made me wonder is, if in fact Dasharatha was involved in this war between the Devas and the Asuras, where was that going on? And it would have been going on in an ethereal dimension. It would not have been happening here on Earth. because that's where the devas and the asuras live. They can come down here occasionally, but this is like coming to the bottom of the ocean for them. It's extremely, you know, people, they say that the devas and the asuras want to be born here when they are ready to evolve, but otherwise they want to stay in the nice ethereal world where things are a lot simpler. We're at the bottom of the karmic totem pole. The good news is, as it says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, once you are lying on the ground, you have no further to fall. So we can be happy about that. It's only up from here. I mean, yes, you can dig yourself a bigger hole, but you're still on the ground. So the happy news is we can move in another direction. But if Dasharatha and Kaikeyi were fighting this battle for the devas against the asuras, they were not fighting it here. They were fighting it in another dimension. Which means, quite possibly, that back at that time, people were spending lots of their time in some other dimension other than in this dimension, where we are. So whenever you hear the story of the Ramayana, you read the Ramayana, you should remember that it's important not to identify it too much with things in the physical world. It's important to let that sit lightly, let that sit calmly on us. Because back at that time, people would have been very different. Very, very different. There even today are a few people who are very, very different. Not many, but still a few. Like Vimalananda's guru, who left his body in 1993, though you can still go and see his samadhi. I knew him for 10 years. I visited him once or twice a year. And he was the only person I've met so far in life who had a certificate from the Archaeological Survey of India. I saw this certificate several times. And the certificate said, this is to certify that Ram Vishwambar Das, that was his name, was found during an archaeological dig, they didn't use the word dig, excavation, in the Khurda Road Taluka of Puri district of Orissa state in the year 1905. So they had been, these archaeologists, the Archaeological Survey of India had just been inaugurated in 1905, and they were excavating a temple that had collapsed 200 years ago, 200 years before, and they found this yogi sitting in samadhi. Which, of course, was unusual even then. So what they did was they went to Puri, and back at that time, I doubt that it's the case now, but back at that time, they had a specialist in Puri who was a specialist in bringing people down out of samadhi. Everybody else wants to go into samadhi. There was somebody who specialized, so they brought him down out of samadhi, and you know, he was coming out of samadhi after 200 years. And he made the mistake, apparently, I heard this later, he made the mistake of curing someone who was blind and making them see again. And then, of course, everybody in the neighborhood started to come to where he was so they could get some of that medicine too. So he actually had to flee. So he fled and he kept moving around, and he came down to Simhachalam, which is outside the city of Vishakhapatnam, and lived there for 88 years. Spent quite a bit of time in a tree, only living on air. Finally came down and started living on a rock. But things started going wrong for him when he visited Bombay. And as Vimalananda used to like to say, Bombay has been the ruination of even extremely good saints, because of the gravity of the place. He always used to say that Bombay was Moha Mayi Nagari. It was the city where everything is full of moha. And I have to say, I'm extraordinarily fond of Bombay. I went there first in '74, and I've lived there for 4 years, and then it's been my base since the last 40 years there. And I feel right at home there, but it absolutely has that quality of delusion in the gravity, in the water, in the air, everything there. There's something about that particular place. Just as Benares, which is the other city in India that I'm a creature of, it's the Shiva city, which means that it's good to go there to die. It's good to go there to learn things. It's not good to go there to have fun or try to, make money or things like that. It's not meant for that. It's meant for death. Bombay is meant for delusion. So he went to Bombay and he started drinking water a teaspoon at a time, Guru Maharaj. And as the years went by, he proceeded from water, then he started drinking a little milk. And when I knew him, he drank this much milk in a day, this much cola drink. Back at that time, Indira Gandhi had kicked Coca-Cola out of the country, so it was Campo Cola or Double 7 or something like that. And the only solid food he would eat was tobacco, and I do not mean he would chew it up and spit it out. I mean he would get 2 big black tobacco leaves, and he would tear them into strips and chew them up and swallow them. I don't know if any of you have ever eaten tobacco, but let me report to you, it is a strong emetic, which means it will not stay in your stomach very long. It will come right back up. If you're lucky, because if it stays in your stomach, it's a deadly poison. People die from nicotine. So he was eating this, and I saw this for, on several occasions, and one day I was thinking, what, how is it, what? And of course, he never wasted time waiting for people to talk. He would hear what they were thinking and either kick them out or answer. So he was always nice to me. He was always nice. Most people he would not even let in the door. He would just say, oh, which means go in Telugu. Ore. If they wouldn't go, he would shout at them some more. And if then they wouldn't go, he would pick up whatever is there, a rock, a coconut, a bottle of some kind, and throw it at them. Then they would leave. But he always liked me for some reason. I think it's because Vimalananda made him promise not to kill me, which he gladly would have done, I'm sure, on several occasions. On this occasion, though, he opened his mouth and said, what is the use of eating food? You ruin your teeth. And he had 2 rows of teeth. The front row were all worn down, and the second row were all nice and bright and shiny. What is the use? You ruin your teeth, you wear out your digestive, you get some kind of disease, you have to poop it out. Why? An intelligent person will find something really poisonous, will eat it, will do internal alchemy on it, and will create whatever they need. I said, yes, Guruji. What else was I going to say? This is a great idea. How am I did not dare to say something like, show me how to do it. That would have, he would have gone ballistic. So he got his prana, he did breathe, he got his prana from breathing, from tobacco, and from the sun. He was a worshiper of Gayatri. In fact, I would massage him, and he would, after a while, he would say, he would make me stop, and one day I had the thought, why is he making me stop? And he said, if you apply too much oil, I can't get the sun rays into my pores well enough. It interferes with the translation of the sun rays into my bones. I said, yes, Guruji. He was also one of those people like Vimalananda that said, you know, repeating mantras with your mouth is all well and good, but you have these tens of thousands of pores on your body. You should be repeating them with them. Then that's beneficial. Instead of one mantra, you can get, you know, 60,000 mantras every time you repeat it. I said, yes, Guruji. What am I going to say? So there are people like this, even up until, you know, 27 years ago. There may still be people like that who are hiding out somewhere, who have not yet been discovered by the archaeological survey. Who knows? But my point is, if this was happening even this recently, what was happening 100,000 years ago, or 1,000,000 years ago? We don't know. But we do know that we should not, when we read the Ramayana, it's important not to read it from the human point of view of today. It's important to read it in such a way that we, and Guru Maharaj used to say that Lanka doesn't exist. Lanka is where Ravana was living. You can access it from this world, but it doesn't exist in this dimension. So it's possible you can access it from Sri Lanka, in fact. There is still a Ravana's cave. I haven't ever been there yet. But it's quite possible that you could access Lanka from there. But it's not like Lanka was there. So it was much easier back at that time for people to be no body, because even if they had a body, they were not as tied to it as we are nowadays. Because we're living at a time when everything is very much externalized, and the more externalized things are, the more you're tied down to the external world. This is why IMO, it is so important for people to put some energy into what Patanjali called Pratyahara, and what other people, Goenkaji likes to call being antarmukhi. Antar means on the inside, and mukha means mouth. Mukha also means face. Pratyahara means, ahara means to take something in. But most of the time, ahara means food. But it means taking anything in through your sense organs. Pratyahara means to stop taking things in from the external senses, open the internal senses, and activate them with the help of that prana that you were taking into your pranamaya kosha, because you were trying to practice Vedanta. Though don't try to practice Vedanta until you have either gone through the Vedas or something similar to the Vedas. Because it is Vedanta, it's the end of the Veda. And for the Veda, of course, there was fire worship happening all the time to activate the fire in your body. And you were chanting the Vedic mantras 3 hours a day for 12 years, except for the new moon and the occasional holidays. Which means you got 12 years, 12,000 hours of reciting those mantras, minus 8 or 10,000 hours that you had to, that was the interest that you paid to God for the mantra. So you got in your 10,000 hours of engineering your nervous system so that the prana, it would be second nature for the prana to circulate in you in a particular way. Then you can think about Vedanta. Once you've engineered your organism, then you can say, yes, I'm ready to allow the prana to enter me. I'm ready to allow the prana to flow through me in a major way so that I can be of benefit to the world. Not so I can accumulate a bunch of prana and become like Ravana, for example, who, let's not forget, did not start out life as Ravana. He started out life as Hiranyakashipu, who didn't start out life as Hiranyakashipu. He started out life as Jaya, who along with Vijaya were the two doorkeepers of Vishnu. They were supposed to allow in the people that Vishnu needed to meet and keep the people who Vishnu should not meet out. Why Vishnu needed a doorkeeper is obscure. You would have thought that Vishnu could have arranged things automatically so that nobody could even get to Vaikuntha unless they belonged there. But obviously, the story would not have been able to unfold in the way it unfolded if there were no doorkeepers. So anyway, here were these doorkeepers, and these doorkeepers felt like they were extremely clever because they were, after all, Vishnu's doorkeepers. They had become somebody, and it is never good to become somebody. In fact, before I go ahead on that, and this is a honored tradition in India, while you're telling one story, you tell another story before you finish with the one story. And it's a really good system, frankly. So I often teach with my distinguished friend and colleague, Dr. Claudia Welch, and her guru, Sant Ajay Singh, used to like to tell the story of a guru who told his disciple, never become anybody. Don't become anybody. Because the disciple, like all disciples, had been pestering the guru for knowledge. And the guru thought, I've been offering you my example for the past many years, and you have been too dim-witted, too stupefied, okay. And so finally, he is now saying, I want knowledge. And the guru said, okay, you want knowledge? Don't become anybody. So now the guy is working very hard at not becoming anybody. And he's walking through the forest, and he sees a carpet laid out on the ground. And on the carpet there is a nice bolster. And in front of the bolster there's a bunch of good-looking food and some things to drink. And he thinks to himself, he could have thought anything to himself, but he thinks to himself, what is this doing out here? Someone must have known that I, disciple of this eminent guru, long-term disciple, senior disciple of this, someone must have known I would be coming this way, and they have put it out here for me. And so he sat down, enjoyed everything, and was lying against the bolster, relaxing, when a soldier wandered into the clearing, and in a state of extreme uncertainty, said, who exactly are you? And the sadhu said, why, I am a yogi. And clearly this was set out for whichever yogi would come through this area, and I, being a yogi, have come here and I have enjoyed it. And the soldier said, I don't know who you are, I don't know what yogis are all about, but this was all set out for the king who's about to show up here and wanted to have a nice place to sit down and some things to eat, and you have now ruined everything, which means I'm going to give you, before I fix everything, a good hiding with this whip here, so that you will not think about doing this kind of stupidity anymore. So, after a good hiding with the whip, after a number of whip strokes, the yogi is able to escape, and he goes back to the guru, and he says, Guruji, all I did, the guru said, wait a minute, no, stop. I will find out what you did. You don't need to open your mouth. And the guru said, okay, now I see what you've done. And you thought that you could sit there and eat this because why? Now you can talk. And the guy said, well, I'm a sadhu, I'm a yogi. And the Guruji said, did I not tell you not to become anyone? When did you become a yogi? You're not supposed to be anybody. And I told you this, and suddenly you became a yogi. And thankfully, the soldier did the job that I would have had to do on you. had you come back without him intercepting. So, you've had a nice beating. Think twice, or maybe 3 times, before you become anybody in the future. Jaya and Vijaya did not have the advantage of this nice guru. Otherwise, they might have saved themselves a good deal of trouble. They were busy congratulating themselves at how clever they were and how wonderful their karmas were, that they had become the doorkeepers of the great Vishnu. They had darshan of Vishnu regularly. They could go in and talk to Vishnu whenever they wanted to, how great they were. They were actually really great. And while they were thinking about how great they were, 4 5-year-old boys walked up. Now it transpires they were not actually 5 years old, they were probably 5 billion years old. But they happened to look like 5-year-old boys. They were called the Sanat Kumaras. And they said, we have come to visit with the Blessed Vishnu. And the 2 doorkeepers said, why? You were 5-year-old boys. Not wondering where the 5-year-old boys had come from. 5-year-old boys show up at, 4 5-year-old boys show up at Vaikuntha. Inquiring minds want to know, where have they come from? No, because tamas had overtaken them. Stupidity, dullness, inertia. So what they said was, you are 5-year-old boys. You do not belong here. Run off, run away and play. And this irritated the billion-year-old yogis, and they were about to cast extraordinary curses in the direction of these 2 imbeciles. When Vishnu was noticing what was going on from the inside, Lakshmi was massaging his legs. He jumped up. He came to the doorway. And he said, wait, I'm sorry, I don't know how this mistake has occurred. I don't know why I hired these people in the first place. But let me assure you, here I am. You're having darshan of me now. I'm issuing blessings to all of you. Have a great day. Have a great next billion years. And let's meet again really soon. Ciao. Arrivederci. Ciao. And once they had gone and no curses had come from them, Vishnu looked at his 2 doorkeepers and said, WTF? Why in the world did I hire you? Can you not tell the difference between 2 billion-year-old yogis and 5-year-old boys? What is going on? Considering how ignorant you are, considering what the depths of tamas you have, it's going to be essential that you fall down into the deepest, darkest realms of the existence, and after at least 7 births, maybe, if I'm in a good mood, I will allow you to start cleaning the toilets in Vaikuntha, of which, of course, there are none, but he was trying to make a point. And so they said, oh no, please. And after having them be miserable for a while, he finally said, okay, I shall amend your punishment. You will be reborn in various locations, and I shall myself come down and slaughter you so that that will get rid of a good amount of this stupefaction that has taken you over, and eventually you will be rehabilitated. And they said, oh, that's great. So they were happy. And they were reborn, first of all, as Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. Hiranyaksha stole the earth and brought her down under the ocean. And Vishnu, in the form of the sacrificial boar, B-O-A-R, not B-O-R-E, went down to the bottom of the ocean and brought the earth back up after killing Hiranyaksha. And Hiranyakashipu was very pissed off by this because Hiranyaksha was his brother. And of course, one of the things about being born as an asura is the asuras are very much tied down to their definition of self. They're very focused on who they are. So Hiranyakashipu said, how dare this bloody Vishnu character kill my brother? I shall perform unheard of penance so that I will get all kinds of powers and I will conquer the universe, and that will be the end of Vishnu. What will he do then? So he stood on one toe for 10,000 years, subsisting entirely on the smoke from sacrificial fires. And at the end of that period, he had plenty of energy, and Brahma came down to him and said, oh my God, you've been doing all this penance. In fact, you're ruining the universe is starting to smoke. There's so much tapas going on here. You've become so hot. So we don't want to have a fire in the universe. So please, what do you want? And he said, I want to be immortal. And Brahma said, sorry, you can't do that, not possible. So he said, okay, I don't want to die on the land or in the air, or by a weapon or not a weapon, or by a human or not a human, or in the house or not in the house, or during the day or during the night. Brahma said, not bad. Tatastu. Good luck. So he went off and conquered heaven. While he was off and conquering heaven, it transpires that his wife was pregnant. And Narada, the celestial troublemaker, showed up and started singing the praises of Narayana, Vishnu, Narayana, and talked about Narayana, and the fetus was listening from the womb, and became a devotee of Vishnu while still in the womb, and was born and as a devotee of Vishnu, and was always in a good mood, which is why he got the name Prahlad. Prahlad. Pra means in all directions, a whole lot, yes, a bunch. And hlad means happy, joyful. So he was always in a good mood because he knew that Vishnu was the supreme reality. So his father came home after conquering the universe and said, now nobody should worship Vishnu, everybody should worship me because I am the Lord of the universe. And Prahlad said, I don't know, you currently have conquered the universe, but actually Vishnu is the supreme reality. And for a while, it was okay. I mean, it was his son after all. He had just met his son after conquering the universe. He thought he'll grow out of it. But he didn't grow out of it. And after a while, he started to think, Hiranyakashipu started to think, maybe, I mean, after all, I had one child. I'll just kill this one off and I'll get a new child. And the new child will appreciate me more. I am his dad, after all. He needs to appreciate the fact that I am the ruler of the universe. So he started trying to find ways to kill him. And first he was just, he had already tried to convince him and then tried to confuse him, but none of that worked. So he enlisted his sister Holika. And Holika had the ability she had a cloak, a shawl, that she could use it and sit in fire. And she would not be burned. And so, there was a big bonfire one day, and Holika grabbed hold of her nephew and jumped into the fire, but as it transpired, the shawl flew off of her and flew onto Prahlad, and he was saved and she was burned. And every year in India, that burning of Holika is remembered on the occasion of Holi. And that's why Holi is such a raucous time, because it is the burning of the demon Holika. And he tried another couple of times, and then he thought, okay, I'm wasting my time. And then he got a mountain and threw it on top of Prahlad and thought, the mountain is now going to smash him down to the bottom of the ocean, and that will be the end of it. But Vishnu held the mountain up, did not smash Prahlad. But then he said to Prahlad, the karmas have matured, the moment has come. Tomorrow, I am going to kill your father. And when I do that, I'm going to come in a terrifying form. And after I kill your father, if no one calms me down, the entire universe is going to be burned up, which would be inconvenient. So instead of that, it's going to be your job to recite a hymn to me to calm me down. And so, because you're going to do this great job for me, I'm going to give you the special bonus of showing you what I look like, I'm going to look like tomorrow. And I'm also going to show you what I looked like when I killed your uncle. So Prahlad had darshan of both of these avatars, and he was even gladder. He now became Prahlad, Ati Prahlad. And the next day came, and it was evening, and Hiranyakashipu said, "Is Vishnu everywhere?" And Prahlad said yes. "Is he even in this pillar?" Prahlad said yes. So Hiranyakashipu, losing his temper, hit the pillar with his fist. There was a tremendous clap as of a million thunderbolts striking all at once. And out from the pillar jumped the man-lion, Narasimha. Half man and half lion, so he is neither an animal nor a human. He has claws, he has no weapons. It is the evening, it is twilight, not the day and not the night. He carries Hiranyakashipu to the threshold of the room, not in the room, not out of the room. He puts him on his lap, not on the ground, not in the air, and he tears open his belly with his claws and drags out his intestines and wears them as a garland. Prahlad, happily, is already prepared for this, sings, brings Vishnu into a state of being calm again, and everybody is happy. Even Jaya and Vijaya are happy because they're now both dead. One incarnation down, 6 more incarnations to go. Next incarnation for both of them, of course, is Ravana and Kumbhakarna. And it was always a happy thing for me when I went to where Guru Maharaj, my Guru Maharaj, lived, at Simhachalam, because at Simhachalam there's a temple of Varaha Narasimha. It's a joined image of Varaha, who killed Hiranyaksha, and Narasimha. And it's covered with a couple of 100 pounds of sandalwood paste, 364 days of the year. And one day of the year, on Akshaya Tritiya, which is when the sun and the moon are both exalted, they take off the sandalwood paste. The temple has a sandalwood forest, so it has plenty of sandalwood. And then they apply another couple of hundred pounds of sandalwood paste. And they say, I've never been able to go there because, of course, a million people go there when this happens. But they say that the image, there's so much heat in the image that it actually exudes a red fluid, kind of like blood. And that's why they're covering it with sandalwood, to keep Narasimha and Varaha cool, so that the universe can continue to exist and all of us can continue to work through our own karmas, so we can work towards that day when we will be able to become nobody. And on that note, Lokas samastas sukhino bhavantu. Lokas samastas sukhino bhavantu. Lokas samastas sukhino bhavantu. Jai Raghuveer Sama.